Hey, Katie, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Ivan. How are you doing?
I'm very well, and thank you so much for joining me today for the second time because we did a full recording about 2 weeks ago. It was a great one. Unfortunately, it wasn't recorded properly, so we're gonna try a second shot, and I believe it's gonna be even better than the first
We'll
one.
just call that one a dress rehearsal. It's all good.
Yeah. So I'm gonna repeat my questions. In that case, could I ask you to start from introduce yourself for people who don't know you?
Yeah, of course. My name's Katie Craven. I live in Washington State. I've spent the last 20 years in kind of a combination of retail loss prevention and direct e-com fraud management and solution provider support roles. And I'm currently working at Visa. I am leading solutions management for value-added services, risk and identity solutions for North America. And that's a pretty new role for me. I've just been in it for a little over a month. So lots of learning happening right now.
That's great, and congratulations with the new role. I believe it's very exciting to start something new every time.
New year, new role, new me. New me.
Ah,
Maybe not.
that's amazing. We're gonna discuss a lot of the things, but I want to start with my first general questions for everyone who join me in the podcast. Fraud prevention. What is fraud prevention for you?
I've I'm actually glad that I get to answer this again because the first time that we were going through this, I wasn't entirely sure of my answer. And I've had some time to think about it. But for me, fraud prevention has been a passion of mine for my entire career, whether it be in store or through e-commerce fraud or supporting others in their journey of managing fraud. There's always something new to learn. There's always something new to identify. And in some ways, even though I've been in it for 20 years, it still feels very new. In some ways, everything old is new again. It's an industry where I feel like if you're going to be successful in it, you can't stay in your lane. You can't just be focused on fraud. You have to understand the context that you're in. So cross-functionally, you need to understand the business that you're in. You need to understand the stakeholders and your partners. You need to understand the holistic environment that you operate in. And the other thing that I love about it is that people take it so personally. It's very others are very passionate about it as well. You even hear this in how we talk about fraud management. Like we accept and we decline payments, but we fight fraud. We represent chargebacks and disputes, but we fight fraud. And so it's something that I think it draws passionate people into, and I've been very fortunate to have gone through kind of this journey over the last 20 years.
So amazing. You know, one of the things that I believe everyone struggles in the industry when we start to collaborate with different stakeholders, we need to understand how sell it, what is fraud.
Yeah.
What do you believe you can do if you join the company, like new company, and you first time have a meeting with someone from SOT team?
That's a
How you going to sell it for them? What is fraud?
That's a great question. So here's something really. I've actually got a story that I can think of very clearly in my mind. It was back in the days when I was working at GameStop, and we learned about triangulation fraud that was happening for GameStop. So for those who are not familiar with triangulation fraud, what it looked like back then was you'd have somebody who would be trying to buy a video game for less than retail. And at the time, video games cost between $60 and $70. I have no idea what they cost now, but you'd be able to find them on eBay for like 40, $50. And so people would be super excited and they'd buy these video games that were new releases off of eBay. And the way that the triangulation scheme would work is the person who is buying it off eBay would submit their order to the eBay seller, who was a fraudster, who would turn around and take their information with stolen payment credentials and place that order on GameStop.com. And GameStop would ship it to the person who purchased it off eBay. And the way that GameStop found out about this is because customers from eBay were calling GameStop customer service and they were like, hey, I did not order a game from you, but you shipped one to me. So they found out that this was a problem. And so I very like maybe my first week on the job, I was sitting with the manager of customer service and he was talking about this issue that they were having. it seemed very clear to me, like, here's something that we have to do something about. But when I went to say, like, this executive who's in the room with us is saying we have to do something about this, the manager kind of blew it off. You're like, we don't have to worry about it. Like, you're disobeying an executive? Like, I didn't know that was a thing that you could do, you know? So I think that getting the attention of appropriate stakeholders when it comes to fraud can be a challenge at every level, even though for those of us who are super passionate about it, it's plain as day that there's a problem, we need to do something about it. You may not see that at an executive level when you think about, like, kind of where that fraud falls, or that fraud or that problem falls in the grand scheme of all of the different problems that they have to deal with in their own lives and their own jobs. And so, you're going to have the stakeholders that think it's just the cost of doing business, and they're not wrong. I don't think that you're ever going to fully eradicate fraud. God knows we've been trying for decades now. But at the same time, the way that you can get through to individuals who don't necessarily want to hear what you have to say is by truly understanding what they care about. And that takes some curiosity on your part, and it takes some empathy on your part to try to, not just fight your fight, but also make your point known in a way that they will care about so that they actually want to do something about it.
So probably from the perspective, like most of the triggered words you need to mention, like it is affect revenue, we lost money,
Yep.
right?
But it's gonna
But
cost money to
this,
fix the problem, right, Ivan? So why do we wanna spend
yeah,
more, like, why can't you just, like, do your magic and make it go away?
yeah, because unfortunately it's never working like that. We can do it to move it away. However, I believe it's gonna be a huge problem for revenue as well because everyone know if it's no fraud, it's no business because you probably reject everything.
That's right. That's right. Just shut it all down.
Speaking about your experience, like of 20 years, how's the industry changed so far?
Oh gosh. I think kinda going back to the GameStop days, which was really my first introduction to the world of e-commerce fraud. I think that the way that they operated their risk management processes were super, super manual and cumbersome and IT intensive. So, for example, I spent my first couple of weeks working very closely with the customer service team and their order verification team, which is kind of like their manual review team. And I would watch somebody like work an order in earnest. It was like this archaic system that IT had built for them where an e-commerce order would kind of drop into a queue based on certain logic or rules. And they would go through and they'd verify everything about that order to make sure that it was fine to accept it. And they would do that, and then immediately that order would trigger like another rule and drop into another queue. And I would watch the same person re-verify that order all over again. And all I could think was, you just did that. Like, what are you doing? Um, so so thankfully, I think we've moved well beyond days like that. And now what you're starting to see is kind of two things. The first is that a lot of solution providers, and I think a lot of merchants and businesses, are starting to lean into automation. They're starting to see where they can automatically accept and decline orders based on criteria that's known, or based upon consortium data. And the other thing that I think that we're really seeing is that we've gotten very good at stopping transactional fraud, like identifying the fraud that shows up when the actual event is taking place. But where we are starting to see gaps is in that pre-authorization space, where we're starting to see enumeration attacks, which is kind of the harvesting of payment credentials, and card testing attacks, which is like the subsequent attack, trying to test those credentials to see if they're good. So pre-authorization risk screening is a gap that I see for a lot of merchants, and it's showing up a lot in the conversations that I have. The other is kind of that post-transaction kind of process where we're seeing first-party misuse showing up with disputes, and we're seeing refund abuse, and we're seeing things that are happening after the transaction has taken place. And those are very difficult to solve, right? Because in good faith, you've done your due diligence to try to understand, is this a good order? And in good faith, you've accepted it, usually based on past experience with that same customer. And now all of a sudden, they're doing something that is completely out of character or, affecting your business. So it's almost like we've solved like the main fraud issue, and now it's the before and after that we're really focused on.
And when you're speaking about like manual review, I still believe it's plenty of companies who are using manual review. My expectation is going to be about like 40% of the companies around the world still using manual review. I might be wrong, but it's my expectations.
Mhm.
And people who working with automation after you join company where it's still a lot of the manual work. I don't say that's like we need to get rid out of the manual review. I just say people who just using once automation and join the manual review environment, they realize, oh my god, there's so plenty of work here. I need to do it still. Again, all this like copy pasting the same things from one system to another one. So yeah, it's
But
pretty annoying.
I think that that's right. And manual review comes in a few different forms. There's the deliberate like order falls into a queue and it's worked in case management to try to have a human make that decision. But the other area where we see a lot of review is not necessarily at the level of the individual order and trying to figure out if it's good, but more from like a strategy vetting standpoint. So I'm going to soft accept everything that comes into review, but I'm going to have a team of people that are kind of going behind the scenes and evaluating the quality of that decision for accept or whether or not this is actually a risky transaction so that they can fine tune their strategy. So that's something that I think speaks to something that I say a lot, which is you can automate decisioning, but there's always going to be a human behind the scenes somewhere, whether it's you that's turning the dials as the direct merchant managing fraud, or if it's somebody else who is kind of doing it behind the scenes for a machine learning only product. There's always somebody who is behind the scenes. And I think that that is going to be a very interesting thing to see how it evolves with the emergence of generative AI and the fact that we're seeing that machines can make better decisions when it comes to law and when it comes to medicine and when it comes to fine, minute details because they can evaluate patterns at a much greater extent than obviously a human can. Even though the human, like, I'm never probably going to have a self driving car because I can't. But, I think that leaning into the idea of automation being kind of a reality of risk management is something that the industry is moving toward.
I'm glad you mentioned that someone's still behind the scene because right now I saw a lot of the companies who just like still using manual review for the purpose you mentioned as well. That, for example, they help machine learning relearn because someone just manually review cases which is like marked like as suspicious, and something like some cases which still great area or maybe like super high value transaction which is good, but you still don't want to double check if it's like I know $15,000 transaction. You still need to make sure this is looks great. Otherwise, it's hardly affect on all your metrics from the value perspective. So, and back to your like beginning of your journey, can you tell us why you decided to join fraud prevention?
I don't think I've really decided to join it so much as it kind of landed in my lap. And I think that's true of a lot of us that have been in it for a long time. So I started off my career in working at Starbucks. I was a barista and a shift supervisor in the stores, and then I moved into the Dallas field office, and I was like their front desk coordinator. It was like the only job that I kept applying for jobs at the office because I knew somebody there who was kind of helping me get like hired, and they felt sorry for me finally, and they just gave me this job. So my first job out of grad school, working at the front desk, and I have the loss prevention manager come up to my desk and he says to me, "You look bored." And I was like, "Oh my God, I'm going to get fired." Because loss prevention people come in, they have interviews, and then they never show up to work again. But he said, "Well, how would you like to help us out by searching eBay?" And I was intrigued. And so this kind of started my interest in the loss prevention world. So at the time, like there's this extensive loyalty program that Starbucks has now with their app and mobile order and pickup and all of these digital attributes to the way that business works with Starbucks. But back in the day, if you had a problem, they had a literal book of what they called service recovery coupons. There's like 25 in a book, and it was worth whatever drink you wanted. So if you got your hands on a book, it was valued, potentially between $100 and $200, depending on your drink. And so on eBay, we would find that there were people who were taking those books and they were selling them, like selling them for profit.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And so what I would do is I would start searching eBay for sellers that were selling things, not just the service recovery coupons, but also things that they had no business selling, like the bullets of espresso or bottles of syrup, like things that clearly only a partner or somebody who worked for the company would have access to. And I would submit those names or like those seller names to somebody from eBay as part of the Vero program, or verified rights of ownership. And they would come back with the seller information. And I'd submit that to somebody who worked out of the Seattle office. And they would kind of come back and say, yeah, this is a partner. And they'd build a case. And it started with that. And then they gave me access directly to the contact at eBay for Vero. And then they installed their exception reporting system on my desktop. So twice a week, I would search eBay, I'd verify seller information, and then I'd cross reference it with seller activity. And I think I did this for about 3 months, and I searched 450 people, and I caught 250 partners. And like, I was just hooked, like this was like the thrill of the hunt. It was the first time that I felt like my work actually meant something, because I was, answering the phone and checking people in and taking care of the mail and, doing other minor things. But I was doing front desk work, and here I was like doing something that mattered for the company. And I was getting so good at it that they were like, okay, we gotta like maybe scale back on how many investigations you're doing because we're flooding the field. But that was really how I got into it. And it was interesting because I was at a point where I could have gone down a few different paths. Like from the front desk, I could have gone into retail operations, or I could have gone into marketing, or I could have gone into loss prevention. And I chose loss prevention, and I've been choosing it ever since.
It's a great story. I'm hearing this one second time. I'm still really impressed. And my only questions, which I really like, hold it from the last time. So you managed to verify 250 partners.
Yes.
So, did you afraid to go to Starbucks branches afterward?
Was I
Because
afraid
the
to get
people might see, oh my god, because of her, I lost my job.
Actually, no, I was the corporate investigator at that point, so they had no idea. But I did very soon afterward join the loss prevention team. I started off as a compliance specialist doing store audits. And so a lot of that was like looking at cash handling procedures and the point of sale transactions, like safety in like insecurity, looking at the camera systems, looking at like the alarm systems, and then moved into an investigator role and actually like built cases and went in and had the interviews with the individuals who were being deceptive and stealing from the company. So I didn't keep track of how many people I talked to, but yeah, there were some intense moments doing that for sure.
And the last time I asked you about the case, so just kind of like information for people who don't know, because it's didn't record at the end. So because I'm originally from Russia, and around 2000, Starbucks just like start to grow as like something popular. Everyone going there to buy coffee, and I heard from someone the story that someone actually just like created 365 profiles, and just every day getting the free coffee because of the birthday. I found a bit of information because I looking around and see like, is there something additional information probably I missed from this news? So it was actually not one person. It was a person who just created application, very simple application, and put it in Google Store.
Okay.
It says set up your birthday date and set up your I know relative birthday date, and it's give you opportunity just like to have it instead of one, like couple coupons during the year.
Hmm.
It was like kind of application that's worked for about a couple months, and the people really using this one. And it was one of person who actually using this 100 times for the whole year.
Wow.
Almost every 3 days, he going around the different branches and getting free drink.
How funny. I'm glad that you followed up on that story because I think I heard kind of an old wives' tale that that was a thing that people would like abuse the program and go and get a free drink every day. But I didn't realize like someone put technology behind it, and that's probably not shocking. But that's kind of brilliant. It's funny. They would probably never get away with that today. I mean, I'm sure it got shut down, but just the kind of security that they have in place today, I don't think that you could run a bot against it, but that's too funny.
But yeah, in I don't know 2005, I remember Google Play. It is it was no controls as I remember. I mean, it's plenty of applications you can download, all of them, customize them, and no one really care about it.
Right.
And it started from 2010. It's really start to Google and Apple really pay attention what the applications they stored because it was multiple cases around the world with a huge amount of the money that people lost and the suits and yeah.
Wow.
I remember you have a PhD.
I do.
How you got this one, and what's the spectrum your professional is?
I do. Thank you for asking about that. So I earned my PhD in 2016 from Capella University, which is an online university. So I was doing online school kind of before it became the way that we did school during the pandemic. And it's an industrial organizational psychology. And funny story there too. So I had always wanted to get a PhD in psychology, like from the time I was 10 years old. That was kind of, I don't know what I thought I was going to do with it at 10. I just knew like you're going to get your PhD in psychology. And the interest kind of evolved with kind of the place I was in life. So at 10 years old, I wanted to be a child psychologist. And during my high school years, I wanted to be an adolescent psychologist. And then I got to college and started studying psychology. I got a bachelor's and a master's in it. And I decided I didn't really want to do clinical work. I kind of wanted to go into the counseling realm. And I started applying for like every PhD program that I could and didn't get accepted to any of them, which is kind of a blow. In fact,
Yeah,
I got waitlisted at the University of Denver, and usually, like everybody who gets waitlisted gets their spot. I even went to the school and like interviewed for it and everything, but everyone accepted their spot that year. And so it sounds like a sad story. It's not. I actually enrolled at the University of North Texas as a non-degree seeking student, and I got that job at Starbucks. And so twice a week, I would drive from Dallas to Denton, which is not like if you're familiar with the Dallas Fort Worth area, it's about a 2 hour drive in traffic to go from Dallas to Denton. And so I would do that. And I was taking two classes and I enjoyed them. But at that point, I was so burnt out that I was just like, I'm maybe going to put this on hold for a while. So it's honestly like a blessing in disguise that I didn't get into a PhD program right away because I think that I was just in a place in my life where I was very burnt out on school. I really pushed myself to get my master's degree in a year. So it was, which was not the plan originally, but I took a lot of graduate level courses during my undergrad. So it was just like go, 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 and work all these jobs. And now I'm tired. So um, then fast forward, that was like kind of the early aughts to about 2010, and had some pretty major life events, some deaths in the family, both mine and my husband at the time, like in very quick succession within 6 months of each other. And like from that, I kind of took away, life is short. If this is something that you want to do, you can't assume that you're always going to have time to do it. And so I enrolled while I was at GameStop in Capella University. And the reason that I chose Capella and I chose IO psychology is because even though when I was in school, I wanted to do something related to counseling, that would have meant actually giving up the career that I was on. And at that point, I think I was about 4 years into or 5 years into loss prevention. and really loved it and didn't want to like give up my career to go back to school. And so I thought, well, I will just make school work with the life that I have now. And industrial organizational psychology had kind of an outlet in counterproductive work behaviors. It's workplace psychology. So there was like a really natural application to the work that I was doing. And so I started taking classes and just kept going. 2010 like followed me through several different jobs and through a move across the country, going from Dallas up to Seattle area, and lots of life changes. But finally graduated in 2016 with the PhD in IO. So that is
That's great. Really inspirational story. I mean, that's you had something like that's I know kind of some idea behind somewhere to say I really want to do this one. You just like postponed it, and the end, well, like it. It's really inspiring. I don't know. It's I'm a bit speechless in that perspective to say something, but it's great that you're able to achieve what you like want for a long time. Quick question: is it really help you in your fraud career once you get PhD? Because in my mind, working with the people is really useful skill, and especially if you manage the people, it's even more useful skill. So is it really something like give you additional boost for your career, or some of the areas really improved themselves because you started getting something?
I certainly think it has in a few different ways. I mean, obviously, I'm not doing anything directly in IO psychology. There are things that could potentially be relevant. One outlet that it does lend itself to is consulting, and it's kind of known as one of the more applied psychologies as opposed to some of the others, which are more theoretical. So it's one of those ones where you actually can take psychological theory and apply it directly to the workplace. And so there's an element of that, I think, in the work that I do, because the team that I lead does a lot of pre sales fraud consulting, getting to know different use cases and then discovering kind of how different products and services can help meet the needs of those merchants. So there's like an element of that that's applied, but I think that from a credibility standpoint, it's certainly a conversation starter because a lot of people are like, well, what are you doing with it? I think like the big myth about getting a PhD is that you have to be really smart to do it. I don't think that you have to be really smart to get a PhD. I think you have to be willing to work very hard at something for a long time. Like it's basically an endurance sport, which is funny because I went from like the endurance sport of getting the PhD to now running like ultra marathons. So maybe it's just a wiring in my brain, but yeah, it's dealing with some pain for a very long time.
Yeah, and thank you for mentioning that one. So because if a lot of people are afraid, I mean, I'm one of them. I mean, if you ask me to going to apply for any PhD programs, I probably thought for a second, no, it's no chance I'm even close to that one. Even if I really want it, I no chances someone will consider me as a candidate for PhD, because the people with PhD, I mean, they're really smart and they know everything around the world. I'm just like probably focusing on one particular areas. You just like prove a case that if you're really passionate, if you're really passionate about something, you see like always a place where you can study and improve for some of your knowledge and achieve something.
Well, I wouldn't sell yourself short. I'm sure that learning about podcasting was not something that you did overnight, and I think that anything new you embark on is going to come with anxiety and fear and kind of that imposter syndrome of I don't know if I can do this or if I'm smart enough for it or if people will take me seriously or even what I want to do with it after. I just know that this is something that's calling to me. And it's funny, I've got a lot of friends that are all kind of working on different goals right now, whether it be professionally or with physical fitness or just kind of in life. And one of them has said to me, after being on this earth for 54 years, I've discovered that I've really put like a lot of limitations on myself. And so instead of saying I can't because of X, I'm starting to say, why not me? You know, instead of immediately saying I can't, like ask why not, you know? And I think that, that's true for a lot of things, you know, even in the fraud management space. I know we've kind of gotten off track from kind of the fraud management component, but you know, we talked a little bit about like how to get a stakeholder's attention. And I think it's very easy to get kind of caught up in the machine that is corporate America and kind of feel like you're being told, you know, get back in your lane and get in your place. But if you have that mantra, you know, why not me? There's really not much that you can't accomplish in the long run, I think.
This is one of the best advice I've heard so far. I mean, this is why it's not me. I mean, this is simple words, but people most of the time start to care and overcomplicate everything. And this one, just like I'm gonna try worst scenario. I don't know, something happens, but most of the time everything went well, and people realize okay, and they start to request themselves simple questions: Why I hold it these thoughts for a long time? Why I didn't do this one 5, 10 years ago?
Yeah. And that whole thing that you just said about like asking small questions, it's that curiosity, it's that spark, you know, like what brought you into fraud, however you came into this journey that you're in. It started with you being curious about something that you didn't know before. And there's a lot of like pioneering and the fear of the unknown that comes into fraud management. It's not for everyone. You know, I think there's a certain type of person that kind of has that drive to just keep asking questions and keep poking, you know, and keep going down rabbit holes and coming back out and, you know, having your mind blown with what you've uncovered and then trying to get someone's attention so that you can do something about it, right?
Exactly like that. Before we jump from this like managerial things about the fraud prevention, I want to ask you: Do you have any specific questions when you interview people? Some really specific questions that only you ask during this interview.
I think one thing that I do when I'm interviewing is I will review a resume, like kind of top to bottom beforehand. And then I will have that person tell me their story, kind of like what you did, like tell me how you got into this field. Because you can put a ton of stuff on your resume, right? You're just trying to make a good impression of yourself, but everyone's story is their own. And so I really like to kind of set the stage with tell me how you got to where you are, you know? And like this kind of goes back maybe to being trained as an interrogator. Uh, but like listening to the details that they pull out. Like when you ask that question, what comes to mind first? Like what is the thing that you're thinking about that you say to me? That I can probably back up with something that you've written on your resume, but if you tell me your journey and I'm hearing things about how you got to where you are, making decisions or you know challenges that you've met along the way, that tells me something about you and how you'll work with me or how you'll work within the context of the team if I'm like interviewing for someone else, or you know are you going to be a good fit in this world that we're in, you know, not just for fraud prevention but just you know wherever I happen to be working at the time. So that's where I always start is, you know, Ivan, tell me your story. Like, I'm looking at your resume. I would love to hear it in your words. Like, how did you get to where you are? What brings you here? And that's the next question is, so why are we here? You know, why do you want to come work, you know, at Visa or at a certifier or wherever you
Yeah.
happen to be? So,
Some you know some of the people reply, I apply, you offer me an interview, and I'm here. This is my story. So just second.
so that's all you got.
Everything on the paper. I mean, 25 years experience. Yeah, might be true. I'm not sure. I downloaded this one from someone else. Yeah, it's
That's right. Here's a list of my
sometimes the case.
credentials.
Yeah. Have you been victim of fraud?
Oh God, yes, I have. Recently. I was in New York over like right before Christmas, and I got to the hotel, and this is naive of me. It wasn't really. I saw it coming. When I got to the hotel, all the systems were down, so they couldn't do any kind of check-in. So they had everybody write down their credit card number on like the check-in form, and I was like, "And this is where it ends." Next time, I will not write the real credit card number down. I'll make them try to run it, and then they can call me when their systems are back up. But it was a corporate card, and so fast forward a month later, and some fraudster has used it to like reserve an eco rental, like an electric car, like one of those rental services where you can like pick up a car off the street. They'd done that, and I was like, well, at least it's an eco-friendly fraudster. So
Echo fraud. We spoke about this one last time. It's going to be new trends somewhere in the future when it's going to be called like echo fraud.
echo.
Fraudsters who are using quick cards and they spend money for recycling something. I don't know to buy a subscription for recycle something.
Right.
Going to be very useful. I know you have a very exciting story about fraud nightmare case that you cannot shake from your memory.
I'd forgotten about this, but yes, I probably do need to relive that nightmare. So yeah, the one that came to mind, like I've got a couple, but this one, it's been about a decade since this happened, so the details are a little fuzzy, but this is what I remember. Um, when I was at Pier 1 Imports and I was the fraud manager, we had a very close dynamic with the customer care team. So if we put an order in manual review and we got kind of as far as we could with like trying to validate the information, but we couldn't, or we had questions, we would basically send it to customer care and they'd reach out to that customer to try to just connect with them, verify the order, and based on their response, we would then make a decision. So, in hindsight, very manual, but I think like for if you're ordering an entire house of furniture, like maybe you appreciate the gesture. There was an order that we could not verify. And when we attempted to reach out, we didn't get a response. And so we ended up canceling the order. Um, and I found out a couple days later that they called customer care back, and it wasn't this person in particular, but it was somebody that represented this person. And it turned out that we had rejected an order for President Joe Biden.
Yeah,
So, Mr. President, if you're listening, I apologize on behalf of Pier 1 for disrupting your order. Yeah.
you have the option to apologize. It's going to be elections this year, so I believe you have no choice. You rejected order once, you can't go with another candidate, so it's no options for
Oh my
you.
God. Yeah. The other one that came to mind was one, and we talked about this last time too. Just of, I'm pretty good with like kind of being secure with my information. We obviously have been around the block a few times, so if I see fraud, I will do something about it. I've been a subscriber of Spotify since Spotify was new, like back in 2010. And I don't think in all of the years that I've been a subscriber that I've ever gotten like a receipt for any of my transactions. But I got this random receipt that I just kind of was like, huh, that's interesting, that I have a receipt from them because I've been a customer for years. And this was a valid receipt. It had my information on it. It was evidence that I owned, a subscription with Spotify. So one day I go into Spotify and I notice that I've got in my email some emails in German for Spotify. And I don't speak German, but I think that basically what they were saying is your password has been changed. And so I go into the Spotify account and somebody is in there and they've erased all of my music and they've replaced it with like German techno. And so I'm like, oh my God. So I reached out to Spotify and they're like, can you provide proof of the fact that this is your account? I was like, actually, I can. So I dug up that receipt that they randomly sent me one day, and that was enough. And so they restored access to my account. And I actually like on the internet, I found that there's a way to restore your old playlist on Spotify. So if anyone ever gets hacked, you can recover them. But I saw more German emails after that, like they were trying to get in, but I had changed my password at that point. So yeah, now I don't use the same password all the time.
You know, I thought about this story last time. I just like, what's the evil person who just like compromised the account and changed the music there?
Right?
I mean, it is, the same kind of person who going to the cinema before some premiere say, in the end he's die. And you're just like, what's the point of the whole movie?
It's like,
I just like looking forward for next 3 hours of watch something great, but I already know how it ends, and this person ruined it for me. The same kind of person can compromise your account and ruin your playlist.
I
That's you.
know. I should
I don't
have
know.
I should have listened to their music. I think I deleted their playlist too, but I actually do like techno, so I might have liked it.
Maybe someone tried to do something good for you, and you just
And
like
I just thought it was just fraud. Yeah. Take over my
no
account,
chance.
eliminate my music collection, introduce me to yours.
It's a kind of could be a great idea for Spotify when you can swap with someone playlist
That's right.
for you. Let's see, maybe something there. I believe we touched everything that we discussed last time, and as you might recall, one of my last point of the podcasting that I give you an opportunity to share about any of the projects you're working on, and maybe some you want to like draw some attention to the work that you're doing. So here's a great time, kind of spotlight.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I wish I had like more exciting stuff going on, like project wise, and that the one thing I've got coming up, if anyone's going to be at the Merchant Risk Council conference in Vegas in a couple weeks, I am going to be on a panel talking about Gen Z and payments with a couple people from my company as well as a merchant to talk about. This has been like a really interesting project for me, like just having a background in psychology and understanding, you know, adolescent psychology and kind of generational roles and things like that to kind of see how it does play a role in the way that commerce is run and the way that businesses need to be thinking about how they reach their audience in a different way based on a new generation that's focused on different things and cares about different things. It's been a real joy to kind of research this and work on this. So I'm very excited about it. Hopefully, we'll get an audience. It's on Thursday, which I know is not like always the most popular day to attend sessions because by that point, everyone is very tired and ready to go home. But if you happen to be at MRC, I would love it if you come to the panel. And outside of that, I am like I've got lots of ideas that I'm kind of starting to write down. I've been very fascinated by the concept of generative AI. And I've been fascinated about it in kind of a philosophical way. Like I think the interesting thing about our profession is that machine learning and artificial intelligence have been a part of it for decades now, you know? And so you hear a lot about it, but everyone's talking about AI now. And generative AI and the way that AI is typically used in most solutions, it's not the same type of artificial intelligence, but it could be. You know, there could be elements and components if we get the algorithms right that could really change and transform how risk management is done. So that's kind of one avenue of interest for me that I'm going to start like researching and hopefully I'll get my act together and start writing about. And I think I told you like one of the ideas that came to mind kind of stemmed from another presentation I did where we were talking about AI and risk management. And I was sitting on stage like before the panel started. We were talking about like what would happen. Like, do we really think that the robots are going to come for us all? You know, like are the robots going to win? And it was kind of a mixed bag of reactions on from my cohort. Some were like, absolutely, you know, and here's how. And I had a moment where I thought, I don't know, like, I think that if I think that if a robot were to truly become sentient, like if you expose them to all of humanity's emotions, all of the historical events, all of the different traumas that people have seen and even now are seeing, I mean, I don't know that a robot would want to live. And I think that part of that is because as a human, you know, we have we have the benefit of having the time to process and become resilient. And so even though you can experience some terrible things in your life, over the course of your life, you learn that you've survived even the worst days that you have. And so there's some hope that you can have that things could get better or be different. Where I think that if you were to just douse a robot in all of the pain and agony of the world, they might not be able to process that as well. So I'm going to write a short story using ChatGPT on that.
Yeah, I believe the robot like just like simply suicide if you pull all the information. It's gonna be like too much. Like, what's the point to do anything?
Yeah.
It's yeah. Regarding MRC, I'm not sure we're able to post this one before MRC begins. However, if you might have any presentation or any recordings, we definitely can add in this one. Of course, if it's not across any confidential information, or at least we can navigate people from MRC who has access to watch on slides or maybe watch entire the presentation, because it sounds really exciting. And I believe this is one of the ongoing topics that everyone need to be aware of.
Love it. And I'm trying to convince the marketing team that we need to do this in more than just the MRC as well. Like I've really enjoyed working on the content. And I think that it's really relevant now. So hopefully we'll be out there in other avenues coming soon to a conference near you.
Looking forward for that one. Yeah, to be honest, I don't have any other questions. It was I don't know was the first one or the second one the best one, but since we're going with the second one, I want to say once again thank you so much to finding time twice and record this amazing episode. I really enjoyed this one and looking forward to posting that everyone gonna listen.
Thank you. It was my honor to be here. I appreciate it.
So I'm gonna say just like word and not repeat everything else, which is cut.
Perfect.